Good morning, guys and girls. Thought I'd come out today to the woods to cook a bit of brunch and get some fresh air. The main reason for being here is to try out the new Mark2 BCB cook system, and we'll compare the new one with the old one. The reason I like the new one and keen to try it is because, as you all know, the depth of the stove is about twice that of the original Mark1 BCB stove kit, and so it should burn better with sticks. So we're about to find out anyway, so let's stand by for that. As you can all remember, my old favourite BCB Mark1. You can put fire rope in, put in the meths, and then use twigs to extend the burn time by another 10 minutes. So you get a good 20-minute out of your initial burn, and it's left quite clean at the end. And that's why I prefer to use this system, which means versatility. You can have a fire without detection using meths only, and you can extend it if you feel safe enough to make some smoke. The BCB Mark II mug, as everybody knows, is much deeper than the original Mark I. When I say much deeper, probably about an inch. The Mark II has a very good depth, as I've said already, which allows for storing of for a CM rod or matches and your meths burn, or your hexi blocks, whatever you prefer, or gel. I prefer meths every time. It burns steadily and fairly slowly and is very clean. I use sometimes the biofuel and sometimes the meths. So let's put it to the test and see how it performs. It never pays to get too cocky and too confident when it comes to bushcraft or survival. It feels like -2, but it's probably just above freezing, but because it's a very biting wind, the fuel is very cold, and I forgot that meths does not ignite in extremely cold conditions. It has to be given a primer of some sort. So the only answer to that problem is to wait another 10 or 15 minutes, put the fuel in your pocket, warm it up, and hopefully you'll have a get-go. So stand by. I hope we can pull this off in a few moments. I nearly always bring along with me a backup lighter and matches, but because I wanted to do a kind of Ivar Bergman survival look today with the full kit, carrying everything I need to probably survive the night through heavy cover, I just had to reconfigure my kit in a hurry, and that's when things go wrong. If you have a tried and tested system whereby you're always using the same kit every time, then nothing is left out. But if you have to throw something together in an emergency or due to shortage of time, then mistakes are going to be made. So forward planning, as usual, is always absolutely essential. So that away into the forest, try and find some shelter. The reason I came here was because of sunlight, but it's cold sunlight and windy cold sunlight. But the forest was so dark, but it's the best place to be on a day like this. So here goes. Hopefully we'll get the fire started. I might just put up the basher as well. Right then, negotiating safely through this forestation devastation. This used to be a beautiful forest, and I came here today. I'll be here for a year. This is where I once did a video and fell over a log and it dislocated my knee. As you can see, the terrain is dangerous now because they've had tractors and diggers in, and they seem to have taken no trees out really. They just churned up the whole beauty of this forest, and every corner is just carved up with unbelievable vandalism. It's just a horrible place now. It really is like a battlefield, as you can see. So the utopian little forest I used to enjoy no longer, as man as usual comes in and destroys everything to produce money, wealth for the rich investors, harvesting trees and so on, and building houses and green areas. Don't get me started on UK politics. The whole thing's gone to hell really, and there's not much we can say about it except vote for the right people and protect the freedom of the press in order to have some accountability at least. Right then, I guess commercialism and capitalism, but the wrong type of capitalism, commercialism, has always been brutal, dishonest, greedy, unfair. Only a few people in history have pulled out the stops and invested in society and allowed some of their success to filter through and down to people that need it. Full marks for people like that. Takes care of its poor, its elderly and its vulnerable more effectively. So that was a bit of a rant, which I'll probably edit out. Now this is a bit more sheltered along here, so we might be able to back the basher up. Okay guys, we're out of the wind, we're in with a shout, so let's have a quick look. It's not the best assembly of a basher, but it stops the biting wind, and in a hurry. It's actually quite cosy underneath. One would pitch it far more securely without the wrinkles if one was doing a bug out, proper bug out, but this will do the job. So let's crawl inside and attempt to light this damnation stove. Result. Well, that took a while, but we got there. So it just goes to show, if you have backup plans, put them into action and you'll be okay. So I only used a quarter of my usual meth to get it lighted, and that worked, and the fuel was warmed up. So the moral of that lesson is that if you're carrying meth as your fuel, perhaps keep it in your pack near your back so that the heat of your body keeps it warm, and then it's ready for use. Anyway, the fire's going nicely in about 2 minutes. That's really good. Put a couple of twigs across the top to allow air. Let's do that, shall we? So it's quite a fire coming off this, you know, it's quite a heat, which is brilliant. I found that when I put the frying pan on, the air was restricted at the top, so I think what I'm doing is the right thing. So it's basically a little wood stove, and on today's menu it's burgers on a bun with cheese and salad. So I hope you're going to enjoy this. There's a lot of effort put in. So as a comparison, I think I would be right in saying that the Mark2 will give you a fantastic burn contained, but as a twig stove, probably not open enough to give you a steady burn, so you have to allow air to flow through twigs over the top of the stove, creating a fire hazard. So the other possibility is to make sure that when you cut your sticks, you cut them really short, you know, about 1 inch long, so they'll fit in, or small twigs, but then they're going to burn really fast and furious. But if you're trying to cut down on your fuel on a 3 or 4 day expedition, then take time to harvest a good supply of very short dry tinder and twigs, and you'll be able to extend your fire. I have to be honest with you that Mark1, I like it because the fire has a vent on the hinge side of the bracket. It has done the business just by using dry fuel, but you know, it's quite a deep stove, but it does, once it burns down, give off a really fierce heat, even in spite of the fact the initial burn is over. I think once you learn how to manage the Mark2, you might have more advantages than you first realised. Well, we got there in the end. Almost a McDonald's. So the BCB Mark II gave a fierce fire and burned off really quickly. So now I'm going to just try the tried and tested method of meths boil, see how that works. Well, I know you guys will want an honest opinion at the end of all this test. Let's try the tea. Not quite boiling, drinkable. Thankfully the water was purified to begin with. It failed. It burned quickly with draft going through all the holes, and a lot of the heat was lost. I guess the Mark II is okay under a basher with modern army gel, or with which is messy and leaves a sticky residue, which is not very clever, or with of course the good old-fashioned and tried and tested poisonous hexi blocks. I think the hexes would probably do a better job, but because of all the ventilation, both sticks and liquid fuel burn so fast and so quickly that there's not as much control as there is with the Mark I, which I've used now, for 4 or 5 years consistently. So for lightweight and less bulk, I would put my hands on the Mark I as being the winner. The Mark II, a novelty, which is good fun and needs to be experimented with, but cannot be relied on in a real bug-out situation until you've learned how to use it correctly, with the correct type of fuel. But I don't like gel fuel because it's dirty, sticky and messy. And I think if it's just a 1 or 2 nighter, you know, if you're a cadet in the forces, it's okay. You go back to barracks and you clean it up and do what you're told. But for a stealth camper, clean bushcrafting kind of person, you want clean and trustworthy fuel. So you really need to use gas, I guess, in severe conditions. I noticed the exercises a couple of years ago up in Greenland. The NATO forces got their tents up and they had to prime their fuel stoves. I think it was biofuel. They had to prime them first with wet rags and heat up the rings and then build up the primus pressure before the thing would work. So all the challenges they had were of course -10, -20 to -30, so they had to do that anyway. They knew what they were doing, but there was a challenge and a lesson that the NATO forces had to experience for themselves, so they know how to cope with a situation in severe conditions. But as a humble civilian bushcrafter, know your limitations and practice. So this was a good drill today, a very worthwhile use of time. So till next time everybody, Cheery Muckbin from me.